Manspreading. Have you ever heard of manspreading?
I have heard of manspreading, yeah.
Well, I hadn't heard of manspreading before this morning, and I like to just have a look at the trending news in the morning. Mostly it's absolutely rubbish. Sometimes there's a bit of sport on there. Sometimes there's some really thought-provoking things. And there was this one article this morning about this student, 20-year-old student girl in St. Petersburg who has been pouring diluted bleach onto men's crotches on the underground system, on their metro system. She considers herself to be an activist, and she's strongly in favour of equality, apparently. And so she considers that men sitting there, spreading their legs a little wider than she feels that they need to, is them asserting their male dominance over female passengers. And she has taken it upon herself to pour this diluted bleach, which shouldn't harm the men themselves, but will obviously stain their jeans or trousers and ruin their trousers, and just to pour that on their crotch as a sort of protest. And I just thought that this is a really interesting thing because, firstly, I sit sometimes like that, and I've never done it to assert my male dominance. Essentially, I mean, it's
that
just more comfortable.
Me, Jake.
No, I don't need to do that. I'm the only man in my house, and I get very little dominance. I get pushed around by. I've got a wife, 2 daughters, and a female dog, and believe me, I think I'm the lowest on the pecking order. I would say, in the defence of the men, that most of them are probably completely unaware of this woman or the fact that women are offended by this. And they're probably just sitting there because it's slightly more comfortable. I mean, what she doesn't understand is that I have a soft dangly collection between my legs, and so do all other men. And if you wear jeans, especially the tight jeans that are kind of fashionable today, it's very uncomfortable. So it's a lot more comfortable just to spread your legs a little bit wider and give yourself a little bit more space. And if this is offensive to women, then I must apologise, because clearly, if she takes it upon herself to act in the defence of all women, then I can quite logically take it upon myself to apologise on behalf of all men. It's crazy. Of course I can't. I can't apologise on behalf of anybody except for myself, and she should not take it upon herself to essentially physically assault people because she believes that she's doing right. She's an activist. I would suggest perhaps if she does feel offended by this behaviour, the next time, instead of ruining a man's trousers and humiliating him in front of people, he might be on his way to work and now he has to turn up at work and he's humiliated by all of this. Perhaps she could actually try using her mouth and talking to him and saying, excuse me, I think that I find this offensive. Do you mind? And I bet you 9 times out of 10, he would be surprised by this and would apologise and say, no problem at all. Because
she needs to use her big words.
She used to use her big words. She's actually physically assaulting people, and if she did it to me, I would literally file a complaint with her and take her to court for it, because someone has to make a stand against people making a stand. What it is it's anger, and she has confused a couple of things. And one of these things is that she's very angry about something, and secondly, she thinks that because she's angry, she's right, and she seems to believe that she can understand other people's points of view and read their minds. And you've heard people who are extreme fascists and stuff saying, and racists saying, I'm only saying what everybody else is thinking, but too afraid to say for themselves. So in other words, I'm standing up for all of you, and that's what she appears to be doing. She's making a stand on behalf of everybody else, because clearly she can read everybody else's mind, and all women are equally offended by this behaviour. And also all men are equally asserting their dominance and being very sexist against women. And the irony of the whole thing, she's talking about sexual equality, and yet in the photos that I've seen, and people are saying that she staged it and they were actors, they weren't real people, and I don't care if they were actors or real people. The whole thing is disgraceful to me. And the irony is that in the photos, she's wearing a short skirt. So on the one hand, she's talking about sexual equality. And on the other hand, she's wearing an item of clothing which is specific to one of the sexes. And it occurs to me that if she were to wear a short skirt, she wouldn't feel comfortable sitting manspreading, spreading her legs wide, because people would see up her skirt. So perhaps, maybe she should try wearing a pair of jeans and then see if she feels comfortable manspreading, or woman spreading in this case.
Well, I'll do you one better, because there is actually a video on the YouTube where a guy named Stephen Crowder gets women to try on a special pair of boxers or pair of pants, which have the junk. And then he asks them to cross their legs.
Yeah.
And they find it really uncomfortable. And so they get an understanding of why it is that the dudes do the manspreading.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to make a distinction between A, being a bit of a douche, and B, just the natural differences between traditional men and women. Because I have experienced people who decide to take up more room than is perhaps polite, in the sense that, let's say you're sitting on a train or something like that, and there is an obvious amount of room for each individual, and they decide that they're going to take up 1.5 times the room, and you've got basically 1/2. Doesn't necessarily mean... it can be any reason, whether it be manspreading or whether it be an additional bag or something like that. But the point is that you should attempt to be polite and courteous to other people. Yeah. But to differentiate that between just traditional or manspreading, I think it's important to do, because she's also reading intent. So she doesn't really know what the intent is of those individuals. That's right. And I have manspread before, and as you said, there isn't any intent behind it. I think you make a good point about the fact that she needs to use her words. Yeah. Because you could also say that at some stage she's going to come across a guy who perhaps isn't very civil.
But I would have thought, I agree, and things might get nasty then at that stage, and I think that you're right, because most of the people, if they were asserting their male dominance and somebody did that to them, that would be a huge kick in the balls, if you like, to their sense of male dominance, in which case, if they truly did feel this sort of need to assert their dominance, then they would probably have to, by their own standards, show more dominance to overcome this. So you're right, probably none of them were, but I just thought it was a really interesting little thing, because it's this, like you say, reading intent in other people. It's that she seems to believe that she has the answer to everything, and I just turn this on its head, because when you and I worked together in the same office years before we started doing anything like this, there was a girl or a lady in the office who used to tell me off for sitting cross-legged the way a woman would sit cross-legged. There are two ways that you can sit cross-legged. One is to have a sort of A shape with your knee jutting out and taking over the space, and another one is just a sort of like, I suppose it's difficult to describe over the air, but the other one is to just to put your one knee over the other, if you know what I mean. And I used to sit like that because I found it quite comfortable. As long as you move your junk out of the way, you can sort of rise it up a little bit, and it could be quite comfortable that way.
Details are not required.
No, but you can imagine. And so
that's
she
the
always
thing.
used
I
to
am
tell
now
me
imagining though.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry about that. That's just put you off your food. But you're a vegetarian anyway, a vegan, so you don't, you just get the 2 veg anyway. Anyway, sorry. What I was going to say was that she would always tell me off and say that I should sit like a man. I'm not manly enough, and her husband would never sit like that. She would tell me, and verbally tell me to sit differently. So there you go. You've got gender stereotypes. You've got people reading, I suppose, Derren Brown style, trying to read other people's minds and assuming that they know what everybody else is thinking. I think that little story has it all for me. I really enjoyed that little story. So there you go. I just thought I'd mention it.
Well, the other thing I like to do is see what it would be like the other way around and how people would react. So if it would be acceptable to, let's say, if a female had her cleavage on display and a man was going around with watered down bleach saying that women were using their toxic femininity to distract men or something like that. I think there would be a fair few number of people who would object to that.
Absolutely, yeah. It just goes to show that he may believe he's doing the right thing, and she clearly thinks that she's doing the right thing. But ultimately, they're both assaulting other people, and they're both coming from a place that's it's very, very strange. It's very wrong. So there you go. That's the same kind of philosophy, in my view.
Well, I think we would both agree that no bleach attacks are okay, and discussing with big words would be the way forward.
Yeah, big word it. Actually try talking to another human being and saying, look, I'm sorry, I'm sure you don't mean to be offensive to me, but I am feeling a bit offended. Do you mind just closing your legs a little bit? Or as the woman in the office used to say to me, do you mind sitting more like a real man?